42 days and counting. It's just getting going, and this day 6 weeks, it'll almost all be over, bar the counting. So who's your money on? Welcome to The View. Tonight, the race is on. Rishi Sunak surprised just about everyone when he called the election yesterday, and the political parties have no choice but to dive straight into their campaigns. We have representatives from the 5 main parties in studio, and I'll be asking them who's running where and what seats they're targeting. Plus, we can reveal that the Prime Minister has been warned a delay in releasing funding for the Casement Park redevelopment is jeopardising Northern Ireland's inclusion in the 2028 Euros, as a new economic assessment suggests hosting games would provide a boost of more than £100 million to the local economy. We'll bring you the full details shortly. Hello, there's no shortage of questions ahead of the general election, but at least we do know the polling date, and the party machines are hastily swinging into action. There'll be plenty of conversations in this studio between now and July the 4th, but let's get things started with the first 5-party debate of the campaign. I'm joined by the SDLP's Claire Hanna, Robbie Butler from the Ulster Unionist Party, Saoirse Eastwood from the Alliance Party, Paul Given from the DUP, and John Finucane from Sinn Féin. So welcome to all of you, and thanks for joining us on the programme tonight. Paul Given, first of all, we know the 4 other politicians at the table tonight are going to be candidates in this election. Presumably, you're going to be the DUP candidate in Lagan Valley. Otherwise, why else would you be here?
Well, I'm sure you would like to get that scoop tonight, Mark, but you'll just have to wait a little bit longer. We're finalising our process of candidates, and that is nearly completed, and then we will be able to announce that. But what is vitally important isn't necessarily the individual, but it's the party, and it's in those constituencies who is going to win those seats, and we will be fielding candidates across Northern Ireland, and we'll be fielding them to win, because we need to win this election. We currently have 8 members of Parliament, and we have delivered over the past 4.5 years. And so we are going to put forward the best team, because we need to make sure that those who go to Westminster, who show up, who make the case, can deliver, and the DUP have a track record of doing that. OK, you've got 7 MPs because, of course, Jeffrey Donaldson is no longer a member of the DUP. It is 8 weeks since your former leader parted company with the DUP. You've had plenty of time to pick a candidate. Why would it not be you? Well, we will get that resolved in the next short period of time.
How short a period of time?
Well, an election has been called, and we're finalising the process, and those candidates will be announced. And there's a number of constituencies where that has to be. OK, let me ask you this question. Let me put it to you this way. Why don't you want to be the MP for Lagan Valley? Well, that's the 3rd effort. So you're doing well, Mark, but I am going to respect the internal processes. I don't think it looks a bit silly that you just can't give me a straight answer to a pretty simple question. No. I mean, I assume you know, for some reason, you won't tell the rest of us around this table tonight. Yes,
what's the problem?
Well, I do know what
you do know?
Of course I know.
You know you're going to be the candidate?
I know what my position is, but there isn't...
Well, what's the big secret? I don't understand.
Well, this is now the 5th time, so we will announce who the candidates will be.
Why the secrecy?
There isn't a problem. There's no problem.
Well, there is a problem. You won't answer the question.
Because I'm respecting the internal processes of our party, and we will announce who that candidate is going to be. So I appreciate the intrigue.
OK.
But in Lagan Valley, clearly there's going to be a contest for that. We will make sure that we put forward the best candidate to hold that seat for the Democratic Unionist Party. And we are here with Saoirse with us. We've got Robbie. People will have a choice.
And they'll be candidates in Lagan Valley.
And they're declared, and they will be standing.
They've no problem telling
the
people that they'll be standing.
But the Democratic Unionist Party, over the past number of elections, have the most councillors. When it came to the Assembly elections, we received the most votes, and we have a track record within that constituency.
Let me ask you this. Do you think you're worried about being the candidate who loses Jeffrey Donaldson's seat for unionism? Because Lagan Valley had the largest decrease in the DUP vote of any constituency in Northern Ireland in 2019, a drop of 16.4 percentage points compared to 5.4 across the rest of Northern Ireland. Maybe it's a bit of a poison chalice for the DUP candidate.
Well, I take nothing for granted in any constituency. We have to go out there and put forward the message, and we have a positive message that we're going to be putting forward in every constituency, including my own.
OK.
And I want to ensure that in a pro-union constituency that we elect a pro-union member of Parliament. This is a national contest,
Right.
and we need to ensure that members of Parliament from Northern Ireland representing unionism are elected within our constituencies.
Okay.
And that's what I want to see in Lagan Valley.
Let me bring in Saoirse Eastwood at this point. Do you think that Lagan Valley is going to be ultimately between you and Paul Givan?
Well, Mark, I think that Lagan Valley is a seat that is definitely in play for Alliance. You've rehearsed some of the steps.
Do you think you're sitting
around
beside
that.
the DUP candidate tonight? What's your gut feeling?
My gut feeling is we've been campaigning for a long time. We've been waiting 5 years to rerun this contest, and at this stage, it doesn't matter to me who the candidate is, because we know that we're putting up a good, positive, progressive campaign, and we are out there to win. And we're looking forward to the next 6 weeks.
Although
and
you would
we
have
really
to turn
think it's
around a
the way
6,500 vote majority.
And it's a new boundary, it's a new constituency. We are excited about the change. Lagan Valley is a changing, diverse, vibrant constituency, and it needs the representation to match. And we think, with support of the community, that we can take the seat, and we're really looking forward to the next 6 weeks to go out and keep doing what we're doing. So that's what we're focused on. OK,
Robbie Butler, you are going to be the Ulster Unionist Party's candidate in Lagan Valley. Just to pick up on something that Paul Givan said, it is possible, isn't it, that, well, while you may well be playing for third place, given you got 8,500 votes the last time round, your name on the ballot paper could in fact cost unionism the seat?
I don't think it will at all, Mark. I think...
well, you hope it won't, but it might.
No, I don't believe it will. I think that Lagan Valley is one of our chief target seats. It was, even when the former leader of the DUP was the MP there, we saw it as a seat that we can win, because we have a different message than the DUP in terms of our positive and confident outlook in terms of unionism. We don't use the bogeyman argument in terms of trying to generate a vote. And Saoirse had said something there, you'd asked her a question. I think it needs to be answered, and that both parties will try and turn it into a two-horse race, and I find that quite disingenuous. I mean, elections come, and there are great changes in elections. The last election was about Brexit and the protocol. That's what it was about, because in the election before that, the figures would show you that the alliance went from 5,000, and then there was a big push in a Brexit protocol debate. But this is a different election. This is a different time. And I do agree with Saoirse. Things are changing in Lagan Valley. We've been on the door since January of this year. We've been engaging with people, and people are hungry for change, and they want a new message.
Yeah, Jeffrey Donaldson, the former DUP leader and still currently the MP for Lagan Valley, not for much longer, and not the DUP MP, of course, at the moment, has been the MP for Lagan Valley since 1997. So you've got to say, whoever the DUP candidate is, whether it's Paul Givan or somebody else, that individual will be in the driving seat as far as the campaign's concerned. If you run, and if the TUV run, there is the potential for the unionist vote to shred, and for that seat to become a non-unionist seat. You have to take that seriously, and that would be on your head.
Well, it absolutely won't. And what I would say is that Jeffrey Donaldson had a huge personal vote. His vote outstripped that of the DUP candidates at any stage. So, and that is absolutely a change in dynamic in this election.
And it dropped dramatically after the last
Lagan Valley regularly polls between 60 and 65% pro-union votes. And consistently, in every election that I've fought, consistently, my vote goes up. It's as simple as that. Okay. That's the reality in Lagan Valley.
Well, we'll see what happens in 6 weeks' time, won't we? Let's broaden the conversation. I want to bring in John Finucane. You're going to be your candidate in North Belfast, no question about that?
Well, our selection convention is next week, but I've obviously put my name forward. So
right, so we can take it as read that you will.
I would hope to be the candidate in North Belfast.
And you don't know yet, or will you be Director of Elections for Sinn Féin? You have been in the past?
I have been in the past.
In all likelihood?
I think that will be worked out in the next couple of days.
Would you not need to know at this stage? With
the election was called yesterday. I think there's still some matters that need to be attended to in different constituencies, and I'm sure I will find that out very soon.
OK, so what is the big challenge for Sinn Féin? 2019 wasn't a fantastic result. A lot of commentators think you'll hang on to the 7 seats that you got. So how do we judge whether it was a good election or not for Sinn Féin? Is it whether you can manage to get an extra seat somewhere? And if that's the case, I mean, where would that seat be?
Well, I think with respect, I wouldn't be as flippant or as casual in saying that there is an expectation that 7 seats will be retained, as I'm sure a lot of other people would say.
What seats do you think you're going to lose?
Well, no, it's not that. If you let me finish the point, it's about not taking your electorate for granted. We were very fortunate and honoured to take 7 MP seats in the last election. We will be fighting very hard and have been working very hard in our constituencies to retain those seats. So I think that has to be the first goal. After that, we want to increase our representation and mandate in other constituencies. If that then translates into extra seats, obviously that will be a good day for us on July 4th. But between now and then, we will be giving our message to the people. We will be out on the doors like all other parties, and we will see in 6 weeks' time exactly where that falls.
Do you know who your candidate's going to be in Foyle? Because if you're going to take that seat back, and that has to be one of your target seats, you have a pretty big hill to climb because the SDLP leader, Colm Eastwood, has a majority of 17,000.
Yeah,
it's a whopping majority.
It's a huge majority. We are very fortunate. We have an outstanding candidate in Foyle, it's Sandra Duffy. Her work and reputation within the community there is second to none. She had an outstanding year as mayor. I understand that she is a name that's going forward to our Ardcoilia this Saturday, but that is the name that's come from the area, from their own selection convention, so I would expect her to be the candidate.
Okay, because there was some talk about maybe a big name candidate being, I don't want to use the phrase parachuted in, but certainly being brought in come the actual election being called. You don't think that's going to happen? There were a few names that were knocking around.
Well, I think with respect, she is a big name in Foyle. She is somebody who has a formidable record in that constituency. I would expect her to be formalised as the candidate within the next couple of days, and I think she will run an incredible campaign.
Do you think she can win that seat?
I think so, absolutely.
You think she can overturn a 17,000 majority?
It is a huge majority that the SDLP has.
It's putting a big burden on her shoulders, isn't it? Saying you think she can do that?
No, I don't think that's a burden at all. I think if she was here and answering for herself, she would say that she is standing because she wants to represent the people of Foyle in a Westminster election, just as she has done at local government, and done so in a way that she has absolutely excelled. So we will see. I wouldn't even say it for any seat that we retain that we are guaranteed. So I'm not saying that in respect of Foyle either. What I am saying is that we will be presenting, I think, very credible and highly capable candidates in this election. OK, let's bring in Claire Hanna from the SDLP. I wanted a quick word about recent polling. Doesn't look terrific for the SDLP, just ahead of the TUV in terms of share. Do you think you can hold on to the 2 seats that you won back in 2019? Seriously?
Yes, I genuinely do. I think people realise that it is worth having good, strong voices for this region in Westminster. They know what it was like. They know what happened on that shift in 2017 to 2019 when we got the worst aspects of Brexit. And I think people know that if you look at things like the protocol bill and the approach that Johnson and Truss were trying to do and had to drop, and they had to drop it in very large part because we stood up day after day and said, this isn't true, and contradicted the nonsense and created solutions for people to rally around. And I believe that that's something that people value.
But it's a very different election campaign this time round, isn't it? Because we were in that. I suppose we were right in the middle of that whole Brexit debate 5 years ago, and in a way, you really did benefit from that as well in South Belfast, because there wasn't a Sinn Féin candidate and there wasn't a Green candidate.
Yeah, no doubt. Brexit and the 2019 election was a moment in time, and I think
that's not going to be what we're talking about this time round, and those other parties may well run candidates.
Moment. I anticipate they will. I understand that they will. Yeah. But we were at a moment in time, and we and other parties and non-party groups did what was in our power to try and avert some of the chaos that has subsequently followed, and I'm proud that we did that. And
potentially a very strong alliance candidate in Kate Nicholl, former Lord Mayor of Belfast, high profile in the Assembly. Some people would say, what's the difference between Claire Hanna and Kate Nicholl?
South Belfast is, as you know, one of the most diverse constituencies, both in terms of its makeup and how it votes. And I think people are they shop around in that regard. I've not really taken a day off for the last last 4.5 years. I'm fairly confident. I've been canvassing for months and months, and I think people value having that. They value having the experience that I bring, both in Westminster and. But there isn't a single vote cast, and I don't take anything for granted at all.
Well, you were very quick off the marks with your posters. I think you are just about the first candidate to get those posters up. We noticed them in South Belfast
we get
last night.
I've got a good. In the month of May, I've got a good husband. I absolutely do, and I think, as everybody in politics knows, it's your family that get you through it. And in the month of May, I've had over 50 volunteers out on the doors and carrying a very strong message, and we're looking forward to the next 6 weeks.
And of course, we've got 4, maybe 5 candidates at the table tonight. And just to remind people watching at home that there'll be a full list of all of the nominations when they are finalised in due course on the BBC News NI website. John Finucane, let's broaden the conversation just to note the fact that this is the first Westminster election with Stormont up and running since 2015. Quite remarkable, actually. 9 years since we had a general election with Stormont actually functioning. And I wonder if you think that will have an impact on the campaign, because the 4 main parties here at this end of the table are in an executive together, working notionally in a joined-up way to deliver what is best for the people of Northern Ireland. But for the next 6 weeks, you are going to be, metaphorically, knocking lumps out of each other. How is that going to work?
Well, I don't think it should or could have any adverse impact on the executive. I think the work that the executive has undertaken since its reformation has recognised the fact that there are a number of issues that are so urgent they have to be dealt with very quickly. It's been talked about on your shows and other shows since before and since the Assembly and the Executive was back up and running.
But it might affect decision making within the Executive, because one party won't want to give another party any kind of leg up or benefit that might help it say it's doing a better job on the ground that might lead to it getting more votes in the general election. You can see that connection.
Well, there will obviously be rules of party that will kick in, but I think parking that issue for one second, your question is about how the executive will function in the next 6 weeks. My point is that I think it will function as it has been, which is focusing on the issues that matter. An executive's best strength and an executive best face forward is when they work together. We've seen examples of that this week. I think possibly the day that the election was announced, our finance minister was on her way back from London, having secured a review and extra money in the coffers in Stormont already. So the election is one thing. All of us at this table will be focused on that, or perhaps all of us will be focused on that.
You're doing it already, aren't you? You're claiming credit for your finance minister.
No. It's one
maybe
example. Maybe
not directly, but indirectly. That's exactly what you're doing.
I'm sure if you go through, all of the ministers have been doing their work this week. The opening of this programme showed the Education Minister making an announcement. So I'm not saying that it is partial just to a Sinn Féin minister. All of the ministers, I would expect, and I think more importantly, Mark, the public would expect to continue to do their work, not just for the next 6 weeks, but beyond and for the rest of Stormont's mandate.
Yeah, it's an interesting point, isn't it? You can understand maybe members of the public, potential voters, Paul Given, being a little bit circumspect about this, maybe taking a slightly jaundiced view. Do you think that the 4 parties in the executive can work effectively together whilst at the same time competing against each other for votes in 18 constituencies across the country?
Well, the election was called yesterday, and I brought through the early year childcare strategy today, and we announced £25 billion. I've been central to taking that forward, working with executive colleagues. I was with Claire this morning and Melted Parents and Gavin Robinson, and that was a cross-party approach.
You're sounding like a candidate.
The point that I'm making is that we have to get on with normal business in the Executive and the Assembly whilst we will fight that Westminster campaign, and there will be heated debates.
It makes it more difficult, doesn't it? Do you accept that? It makes it a little bit trickier at the very least.
Well, again, I suppose people will judge us based upon how we manage that over the next 6 weeks, but we are fighting this election in the context of there being an executive. And in the past 100 days, different ministers from different parties have already taken forward those actions. I announced the £25 million. We resolved teachers' pay. Gordon Lyons dealt with 36 million around football stadiums. So we're getting on with that job. And that's why in this election it's important, because the last Westminster election, you're right, there was no Stormont. There was a coalition that came against and protested, even in my own constituency. Sinn Féin and the SDLP combined got less than 3,000 votes. That's why Saoirse got 13,000. That coalition isn't going to be there in the same way that it was 4.5 years ago. So I think it will have an implication as to why people decide to vote, and we'll put forward the policies that we link in at local government, Stormont, and why we need a strong Westminster team, and that will connect us at every level. And I believe the strongest party has been the DUP at Westminster. We need that strong voice to deliver for us so that we get that funding towards the executive, and we will put that offer towards the people.
And that's fine if that works, I suppose, Saoirse Eastwood. But the difficulty that some people might see in this arrangement is that none of the parties here in the executive will want to do or say anything that might play negatively with the electorate if they are looking for votes. So, for example, we've had the chair of the Fiscal Council here, Sir Robert Choate, saying time and again any sensible government would look at revenue raising because we are in a perilous state as far as Northern Ireland's finances are concerned. What self-respecting politician looking for votes over the next 6 weeks is going to do anything about revenue raising at Stormont? I mean, that would be an act of sheer madness, would it not? And yet, it might be in the best interest of the people of Northern Ireland to think seriously about that.
I think you raise a very valid and interesting question, Mark, and certainly what will be at the forefront of this election will indeed be public finances. The public want to understand that actually what are people trying to do in the course of this campaign to ensure stable finance going forward. And actually, one of the things that we'll be saying that links into that sort of fiscal stability is the need for reform. We've got to do away with this one-year budgeting cycle. I mean, we know it doesn't work for health, education, all of those things that are so critical to people's lives right now. So you're absolutely right. There is a very valid question around that.
You're keen on revenue raising within Alliance, actually, within certain parameters than some of the other parties.
Well, what we're keen on doing, Mark, is making sure that we do actually have a stable situation. Most people understand that we're only back in the door of the Assembly. We're not going to be able to do everything we want to do with the envelope that we have. But we know that when we come together, when we are collegiate, when we are working together, when we are going back to Treasury and saying actually the 124% isn't enough, it needs to be something more in the region of 127, that's exactly what this campaign should be about. Issues, policy, not the same old worn out lines and rhetoric that we've heard forever. It actually needs to speak to people in their real lives and how we can help them, and Alliance are looking forward to doing that throughout the course of this campaign. OK,
Robbie Butler, we're not entirely clear where your party is as far as supporting the budget in future is concerned. We know that there's a monitoring round coming up. We know that your health minister of the moment, but not for very much longer, we understand, Robin Swan, voted against the budget. There's some talk about whether or not the party might actually exit the executive and move into opposition if it doesn't play the way your party would like to. The difficulty surely is that if you walk out of the executive now, given that Robin Swan is a candidate in South Antrim, that is going to look like an electoral stunt.
Yeah, so let's just speak about what's going to happen next week. The budget is still to happen. I know that my party leader has written to the other party leaders in regards to supporting our amendment to the budget, which would delay the vote on the budget until such times as the June monitoring round happens, because there's a significant amount of money that's coming in June, and we still don't have a programme for government. And to go back to the point that you were talking to Saoirse about, this executive is in its honeymoon period. It's in its honeymoon period. People don't offer us credibility at the moment, and neither should they, because of the last 8 years, we've had 5 years without any government. So we're still in our infancy. We're still, I think, feeling our way and prioritising the issues which haven't been brought forward in a programme for government. So Tuesday's debate will be really interesting, and I hope that the parties around here are listening and will still look at that amendment, if it's elected, and support the Ulster Unionist Party to take a very pragmatic view on the budget and prioritise the issues that are going to transform Northern Ireland over this next couple of years.
Is it still possible that the Ulster Unionists could pull out of the executive entirely and move into opposition during the course of this election campaign? Is that a possibility?
What I would say is we are a party of the executive by right, and we will be staying in the executive because we will be holding all of the other executive members and ministers to account for that.
So you're guaranteeing, are you on this programme tonight, that the Ulster Unionist Party will not leave the executive?
Yes.
You are?
No, we will not be leaving the executive.
Is that party policy?
Yes, it is.
Right.
We will not be leaving the executive, and it will be up to that point. Now, we're not supporting the budget. Let me be clear about that. The budget is left the Minister for Health 2.3% down on the end-of-year figures for 23-24. The two parties of the Executive Office, in their manifestos, pledged £1 billion each. And actually what happened was a reduction to the health budget, and that doesn't stack up.
OK, let me bring Claire in. Your party's not in the executive, of course, but it is the main party of opposition at Stormont. Do you think the four parties in the executive can work together for the benefit of the people of Northern Ireland, whilst at the same time competing during this general election campaign?
Well, what I think in the last 100 days, I think the opposition, and Matthew O'Toole in particular, has been a genuine force for good. It has freshened up politics. I think it has helped to focus minds, and I don't think there's been a ton of delivery. Robbie said there has been a honeymoon period, notwithstanding, and as Paul said, we had a very early meeting this morning with the childcare group, and I was really pleased. That was a good example of cross-party working and grassroots activism, and we got something meaningful over the line.
Well,
but it was almost...
The amount of money involved is minute compared to what people said
you tell that
was
to families. You tell that to families, the difference between 180 quid extra in their pocket when it's costing £14,000 a year.
400 million, it's 25
to run
million.
A childcare.
Yeah.
But I think your point is right. I don't think devolution is supposed to be about changing people's lives. It's supposed to be about public services as well as working together. I don't think people have seen nearly enough delivery from the executive in the last 100 days or in the last 10, 15 years, and we are determined to achieve that. But part of getting that done is a better UK government, because whether we like it or not, they still control a lot of the fiscal levers, and part of what we're doing is advocating for this region, pushing against a closed door with the Conservatives, but hopefully a more open door with Labour. They will still need to have this region interpreted. People will still need to shout for it in Westminster when those budgets are being set, and we are very, very well placed to do that, and people know that we will do it. We won't just send messages to London. We will send walking, talking, fighting representatives who've got a really good record of getting it up there, going toe-to-toe with ministers and getting outcomes.
Can I just come back to Saoirse Eastwood here, because I did my very best with Paul Givan to find out if he's going to be the candidate for his party in Lagan Valley, or if he's not, who else might be. So I need to ask you, and I'd appreciate, again, if there's any possibility of a straight answer to a straight question, is Naomi Long going to be your candidate in East Belfast?
We have a fantastic team in East Belfast, Mark, and we will be fighting to win in East Belfast, along with all the other constituencies throughout Northern Ireland.
Is that a no, then?
And we will be making an announcement in the coming days, so we look forward to updating you with that.
Well, I look forward to you updating me. You could do that now. I mean, because you had a wry smile on your face when Paul Givan wasn't giving me a straight answer to the question I was asking him. Look, here's the reality. Everybody knows this now. We didn't know at the time, but in fact, we know that some time ago, Naomi Long was selected to be the candidate, and then Stormont came back, and that process seemed to go into some kind of abeyance or hiatus. So it shouldn't be very difficult to know if she's going to be the candidate or not. I know she's away at the moment, but there are phones. Presumably people have been in touch with her. She would want to hit the ground running, would she not? On the basis that if your party is going to win that seat and decapitate the DUP metaphorically in East Belfast, and that's the interim leader of the party, Gavin Robinson, she needs to be the candidate.
We are confident in our team. We are selecting candidates right across Northern Ireland at the minute. We will be concluding that over the coming days. And I look forward to being back in this studio again, Mark, to talk about how well Alliance are going to do in this general election.
If she didn't run. If you want to win the seat, if you're serious about winning the seat, it'd be mad not to run her as the candidate.
We will be able to win that seat in East
So
Belfast.
if it's not her, who will it be then? Who's it going to be? Who else is in this wonderful team?
We'll be letting you know within the next few days, just as we go through processes. You're absolutely right. We're practically only in the door of the Assembly again. So, look, we need to conclude those processes. But, Mark, I'm absolutely confident in every single candidate that will be chosen to run for Alliance in the general election. And I know we're going to have a really, really good performance.
OK. I want to talk just finally to our DUP and Sinn Féin representatives about this other story that we've got tonight. We're going to have more details on shortly. Paul Givan, first of all, the Irish FA and the GAA have sent a joint letter to the Prime Minister warning that it would be a, quote, devastating blow if the opportunity to host the Euro 2028 flagship international tournament simply does not happen. And that would be a situation on your watch. If it times out, I think is the phrase that's being used. And if it times out, that will be under a DUP minister with responsibility for the decision-making process. Is that what's going to happen?
Well, the IFA and the GAA are echoing what Gordon Lyons has been asking for, which is absolute clarity from the UK government in terms of the funding, which the Secretary of State said it wouldn't be an issue. They would find the money. You have the quotes BBC carried out the interviews,
Yeah.
and they haven't followed through on that. So, we're asking for the UK government to put the money where their mouth is, and obviously we're waiting for that response, and now they've called a general election, and clearly that creates issues in respect of it. But the DUP's position, even when I was Sports Minister, we said that we stood by the agreement that had the investment that went into the three main sporting bodies and their stadiums. There was a funding envelope that was available for that. That has increased significantly in respect of Casement Park, and the Treasury needs to provide that funding because it isn't there within the executive to do that. So there isn't a blank cheque in terms of delivering Casement Park, and we're not able to do it within the resources that we have in Northern Ireland.
OK, so we'll see. Just a quick question to you on this, John Finucane. Michelle O'Neill has repeatedly made it clear delivering Casement Park is a priority for her. I wonder if this has been raised recently in the executive. Do you know, and will you make Casement Park an election issue for Sinn Féin?
It's not just a priority for the First Minister, it's a priority for the Executive. That's on the record, and I understand that the report this evening, as you've mentioned in the opening, having the Euros here in Belfast would have a boost of over £100 million to the economy. That's huge. I mean, parking aside the sporting legacy, which will also be huge to this area, that is something that we literally simply cannot afford to miss out on. What I want to see is the Minister working alongside the GAA and the IFA and putting the Executive's voice to the Prime Minister and the British government, who can, despite the calling of an election, can release the funds, because this is something that would be absolutely wonderful for society here. It's one of the biggest tournaments in the world. We can't afford to miss out on it. Casement will be built, but we need to ensure it's built in time that we can see the Euros coming here. OK,
well, we'll see what happens. We'll continue to keep a close eye on it. We need to leave it there, folks. Thank you all very much indeed for coming in to join us. We'll have more on that breaking Casement Park story in just a moment. But first, a summer election here might have been something that took us all by surprise. But in fact, election season is, of course, already well underway in the Republic, with voters there due to go to the polls in just over a fortnight in local government and European elections. Darren Marshall has been hearing about some of the key talking points.
What's different about this election cycle, I think, is that issue of immigration, and we have seen the tents on the side of the Grand Canal in Dublin. They're still there, they were removed, more came in their place. So it's very much to the forefront of discussion, and I think it's something that's coming up on the doorsteps.
So the three big parties, at the minute they're actually relatively close to one another in the low 20s. If you go back a year and a half ago, Sinn Féin was long ahead of the other parties on the mid-30s, but they've seen a steady decline in the same period in which immigration has become a very, very important issue.
More countries do not influence military votes.
We punch in Article 9, but you're talking about being voluntary.
An agreement means they have to agree rather than they should.
There was much surprise in the February 2020 general election when Sinn Féin candidates had swarms of canvassers all across the constituencies, and many of those canvassers were bussed down from Northern Ireland, and also just running two elections for a party that covers the whole of Ireland is difficult. Now, it's a party not without resources, but those resources could well be stretched thin, and I think Sinn Féin really wants a very good result in the Westminster election.
And we'll have more from the campaign in the Republic on this weekend's Sunday Politics. Do join me for that. But let's go back to Casement Park and the potential economic boost that hosting Euro 2028 games could provide. Belfast is due to host 5 nights of football as part of a joint UK and Ireland bid, provided the Casement Park Stadium in West Belfast is redeveloped in time. An economic assessment published in the past few minutes suggests those matches could be worth more than £100 million to the local economy. Let's get more on this now from the report's author, Andrew Webb, who's Chief Economist at Grant Thornton here. Welcome to the programme. Thank you for joining us. That's a lot of money. Tell us something about the metrics that were used here to work out that figure. Where did it come from?
Sure. I'll just start, though, with just talking about Tourism Northern Ireland's ambitions for tourism here to grow the tourism sector by at least 50% over the next number of years. So to do that, they need to give people reasons to come, and Euro 2028 is a massive reason for people to come. So the analysis that we did in Grant Thornton looks at 5 games in June 2028, and it profiles the spectator numbers that would be associated with that. We think about the number of local versus international out-of-state visitors that have come in, and we use analysis from other sporting events, other football events that have happened, and we draw through then the length of time that they would typically stay here. And we know then from analysis on spend and transaction data that we've used in other economic impact analyses for sporting events, the likely spend that they will generate in the economy. So that all tracks through to about 52 million for hotels and hospitality. And then they also spend in bars, restaurants and other retail and doing other things when they're here. So that's another 54 million, bringing us to 106. Really significant impact locally on the economy. So, and we think, when we compare it to, I suppose, other events that we've had, we've had the Giro, we've had the MTV Awards down the years, we've had the Open. It really
so compared to the Open, say, which is the last big sporting event we had here, was 2019, was it? What do you reckon the boost to the economy was from that?
So from that, the analysis suggested 41 million of economic impact, and I think as well the PR impact, the positive impression that the Northern Ireland gained from all the media attention was another 60 million. We haven't counted that piece. Right. We haven't counted that positive.
So in terms of that 40 million, it's 2.5 times that for the Euros, plus all the other stuff that you haven't counted in terms of effectively exposure on a global platform.
Yeah, I mean, that exposure piece is really, really significant. And, if we look at the Open recently in Liverpool, that exposure piece was valued at well over 100 million. So just the eyes on Northern Ireland from hosting the Euros will be really significant, and then there's an enduring legacy of that through positive views of Northern Ireland and people wanting to come and invest here as well.
So I don't want to draw you into the politics of all of this, but I mean, would it be right to say that the additional spend in making Casement suitable and available and ready for the Euros would more than pay for itself in terms of the exposure we would get and the visits we would get and the economic benefit that we would get from having spent that extra money compared to just building a GAA stadium?
I think the proposal to have the Euros and concerts and other sporting events, not just the Euros but beyond the Euros, which we can get to in due course with a more analysis. This will be a world-class stadium for many years after the Euros, and we'll have events. That's another additional millions of pounds in other events after the Euros. So there's much more to come from this.
Yeah, and just to be absolutely clear, in case there are people watching this who think you've just sat down with a fag packet and scribbled a few numbers on it, it's a lot more robust than that, because you've taken into account the figures for the whole UK-wide economic boost, and then you've done a calculation in one direction to give us the Northern Ireland version of that, and then you've put the figures back on again to make sure that they are robust. So they're robust on the one hand, you're saying, and they're also, is it fair to say, potentially quite conservative?
Well, the whole tournament has been valued at 2.6 billion. And you could do a reasonably crude calculation and say if we get 5 games out of a total of 51 games, that would be 255 million. So our analysis, I think, is much more prudent and conservative and tracks through the potential outcomes and the spend that the people who would actually come here would generate.
Right. So if you just took that UK figure and worked back, you'd get to a figure that would be 2.5 times the figure that you've arrived at. Yeah. So that would suggest you've been quite conservative.
I always prefer to be conservative when we're trying to do economic impact analyses, because there's a cynicism about economists, unfortunately, and I think to put the assumptions in that are prudent and conservative, I think, is more credible.
Would you say there's a potential reputational damage if we don't go ahead and actually deliver this at the level we could?
Absolutely. To show the world that we can deliver an event on this scale means that people will want to visit here. They know we're going to be open for business, and that impacts down the line with potential inward investment.
Fascinating discussion, really interesting figures. Thank you very much indeed, Andrew Webb, for coming in to talk to us. There's more on this breaking story on the BBC News NI website now, and again tomorrow morning on Good Morning Ulster. That's just about it for tonight. I'll be back at the weekend with Sunday Politics. That'll be on BBC One and iPlayer at the usual time of 10 o'clock. And as we ramp up our pre-election coverage, you can look out for the start of our Red Lines constituency profiles. The first of those will drop on Wednesday on BBC Sounds. We've got a busy 41 days of campaigning and coverage ahead. Thanks for watching tonight from all of us. Bye-bye.